years before the name Jack the Ripper terrified the world, a killer was already executing an almost identical series of murders right here in America. The year was 1884. The city was Austin, Texas, and the threat was entirely invisible until it was already inside. He worked with terrifying intimacy. He picked the locks of homes while the residents slept, never bringing a weapon. Instead, he'd slip inside, find an axe waiting in the kitchen, and use the very tools these women worked with against them. Because he weaponized the everyday objects inside the victims' own homes, nobody saw him coming. There was no suspicious figure carrying an axe through the streets to catch the attention of the police. On the night of December 30th, that invisibility proved fatal. A young domestic servant named Molly Smith was asleep in a small cabin behind her employer's house. Someone broke in, struck her in the head with an axe, and dragged her out into the cold yard. When local authorities arrived, they wrote the scene off entirely, assuming it was an isolated domestic dispute or a robbery gone wrong. That casual dismissal gave the killer exactly what he needed: time. Nobody was looking for a pattern, which meant nobody was looking for him. The tragedy of Molly Smith's death was compounded by the city's blindness. By treating her murder as a random act of violence, Austin left the door wide open for America's earliest documented serial killer to escalate. That escalation hit hard a few months later. In early May of 1885, a cook named Eliza Shelley was found murdered in her home. Just over 2 weeks after that, another young servant, Irene Cross, suffered the exact same fate. Look at this timeline of the attacks, revealing a set of matching data points. Every victim shared the same profile: young, female, working as domestic servants, attacked at night in their quarters, and killed with an axe found on the property. The local press originally called them the Austin Axe Murders, but it was a writer living in the city, William Sidney Porter, better known as O. Henry, who gave the threat a permanent name. In a darkly sarcastic letter, he branded the killer the Servant Girl Annihilator. A deep, supernatural dread took hold, particularly within Austin's Black community. Knowing the local police were doing little to protect them, families began burning lamps in their windows all night long, but this double murder triggered a very different reaction from the city. Both Susan Hancock and Eula Phillips were white women. The public panic was explosive. Austin's mayor, now facing intense pressure, immediately called in the Pinkerton Detective Agency. The city's law enforcement response went from total apathy to heavily armed desperation practically overnight. It is a grim reality of the era that a killer was allowed to butcher marginalized women for nearly a full year, and it only became a citywide emergency the moment 2 white women lost their lives. But despite the sudden influx of detectives and armed patrols, the city never got its grand showdown. Right after that Christmas Eve panic, the murders stopped completely. There was no trial. Nobody was ever formally charged. The Pinkertons investigated multiple suspects, but 19th century authorities lacked the modern forensic science necessary to tie a specific suspect to the crime scenes. The killer simply evaporated. He left behind a body count of at least 8 people, a city gripped by terrified rumors, and absolutely no trace of his true identity. Without a confession, a trial, or physical evidence, the case remains a permanent void. A series of 8 murders that were documented but never solved. Fast forward exactly 3 years to 1888. The setting shifts across the Atlantic, deep into the grimy, winding streets of London's Whitechapel district. This matrix compares the Annihilator to a killer who arrived in London that year, Jack the Ripper. Both targeted highly vulnerable women. Both attacked exclusively in the dead of night. Both exhibited rapid, escalating violence. And both vanished entirely without being identified. This connection relies on local folklore. There is 0 DNA evidence or paper trail proving a suspect traveled between the 2 cities. But the killings in London began almost exactly 3 years after the Austin murder stopped. It leaves historians with a deeply unsettling theory. America's first documented serial killer might not have died or been imprisoned after that bloody Christmas Eve. He may have simply boarded a ship to London, ready to start again.